So moving on, let's take a look at guilt. So this is the next step. Let's take a look at guilt. We're back to the blood. So you mentioned this in the last episode. See what I did there? Blood was dry and indicated a different timeline than that of Michael Petersen. Now, what we've come to understand, there's a few bits with this, and I could mention the timeline, and what I will mention in conjunction with this is the timeline with which he says that he called police. So he said Kathleen had gone inside. He stayed outside smoking that douchebag pipe for 30 to 45 minutes. Those are my words. Before discovering Kathleen in a pool of blood at the foot of the staircase.
But don't forget, he missed the owl attack.
He missed the owl attack. He just he had
the pipe. He was just deep. He was deep in contemplation with the pipe.
You know how hard it is to keep a pipe going? I don't think you appreciate how much time it takes to get that tobacco hot enough.
Not concern a man with a smoking pipe. They do not.
You know, on a
that's why the owl didn't attack him. By the way, afraid of the pipe.
I had a thought along the lines of the pipe while I was cutting the grass yesterday, and that is in the episode in the house, he was smoking the pipe, and I wonder if he wasn't allowed to smoke the pipe in the house when she was around. It was just a weird throwaway thought that just occurred to me. Now that she's gone, he's smoking his pipe in the house like Popeye.
Oh, I thought you were saying like after he bludgeoned her to death, he went outside and smoked his pipe and said, "That'll learn you," to himself. But
no, he did some other things that were somewhat dumb. Yeah, we'll get to that. So with the blood, so the one thing that was noted, the EMTs came and they were taken back by A, how much blood there was, but B, how dry the blood was, given the volume and given when the 911 call was made. And the medical examiner said Kathleen had likely bled out 90 to 120 minutes, during which it is believed she was conscious at least some of the time. And there was some damage to bones in her neck, and there was some chemical in her brain that would indicate she had a loss of blood oxygen to the brain at some point. So there's an interesting piece there with the story doesn't add up to what he's saying, and that's a big problem for Michael Petersen, and it's probably a big reason why he was in jail for as long as he was.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of that is problematic. The amount of blood, the dryness of the blood, it just doesn't comport with his story. And I on the one hand, I understand his defense's point that when have you ever seen a bludgeoning where the skull is not fractured? That seems unusual. But by the same token, when have you ever seen a fall down the stairs result in this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
if anybody here, if you Google injuries, head fall down the stairs or something along those lines, you just Google Petersen fall downstairs. There is on a Reddit forum, and Reddit, if you want to find out the truth on anything, don't do Wikipedia. Obviously, don't go to peer-reviewed papers and things. Go to Reddit, because that's where the truth is.
Absolutely.
And there was a story of a what we would call an OAP here, an old age pensioner, who had fallen down the stairs, and there was a picture of the bottom of her staircase, and it looked exactly like that. So it's not to say that it's impossible. There was also, and they referred to this in the documentary, there was a case in Canada where somebody had been convicted of murder, and it was a fall down the stairway with a heck of a lot of blood. And the medical examiner in Canada overturned the conviction because they ruled that, it wasn't a bludgeoning, it was a fall down the stairs. So a lot of blood doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't fall down the stairs, but dry blood that's been there for 120 minutes and you've called you claim it's 45 minutes. It's weird. It's just inconsistent all around.
Yeah.
So ready for the next one?
Yep, I am.
So do you know what we're looking at here?
We are looking at a coroner's drawing, or whatever they call them, of the injuries sustained by Mrs. Petersen.
And Ratliff. They're side by side. So to the right is the medical examiner's autopsy of Elizabeth Ratliff and her fall down the stairs. And on the left is Kathleen Petersen. both of which had no skull damage. Now, I don't quite know that. I did some Googling on the medical terminology raised in Elizabeth Ratliff's fall. There was some issues with the brain, and I think that was consistent with the condition she had, and I think there was more bleeding. I'm not 100% sure in the comments. If you do have a better idea than me, let me know. But these are, so there's a common denominator here, which is Michael Petersen on 2 falls in which lacerations of the scalp happened without there being fractures of the skull. Those are very specific fingerprint items that have come up in one individual's life. Like you said, these injuries falling down the stairs are weird in itself. To have 2 happen within the proximity of one individual in 2 different countries at, in the same location, same crime scene, more or less, is very, very, very unfortunate for Michael Petersen.
It certainly is. It certainly is.
And when I looked at the autopsy report for this, the original one, it was this image caught me off guard. Lacerations, the term lacerations in both of the autopsies. Big problem.
Okay, why did it catch you off guard?
Well, because it's a fall down the stairs, and I wouldn't expect these injuries to be consistent with a fall down the stairs.
Oh, you're expecting more like a broken neck kind of thing?
Well, if we're saying that he was unfortunate, that he was around 2 people that wound up pretty much in the same exact crime scene, or let's not say crime scene, but in the same exact position, and we were to say that, it's unusual for a fall down the stairs to create injuries like this. The fact that these 2 autopsies from 2 different time periods, 2 different countries, connected to the same person, look very similar. I know that the artistic rendition is slightly different, but they're essentially saying the same thing to the back of the skull for a fall down the stairs.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no. I mean, it's bad for Petersen. I was just you seem to key in on the word laceration. That's why I was.
The laceration. When I saw that word, it just jumped out at me, going, "Oh, this is." And I thought I had the wrong autopsy. I thought I had another version of Kathleen Petersen's, but it was Elizabeth Ratliff's. So it was, for me, that is one of the back-breaking pieces of evidence against Michael Petersen, whether it's bad luck or whatever.
Yeah.
And I did Google, just out of curiosity, I did Google cause of death or findings in stairwell fatalities. I just Googled down that chain, and I did find there was one study in India that was done where they took 100 incidences where people fell down the stairs and died.
Oh, I thought you were going to say they took 100 people and shoved them down the stairs.
No. Until we had 100 people that
Political
died.
dissidents. Come here.
Yeah. Listen, we normally hang people, but this is going to be a little bit different.
You're doing it for science.
Yeah. All right. This is your 3rd go. Maybe we'll get it right this time. But this is such a morbid joke. I love it. Yeah. So, what was I even going to say now? I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I did it. It's a point for me.
It's gone.
That's how you win jury trials. You get the defense to start laughing at its own theory.
What was I going to say here?
They did 100. They did 100.
Oh yeah, so that's right. This study. There's one university study where they studied cause of death by fall downstairs, and I think almost all of them. Again, this was similar to what was said in the example cited in Durham. This was in India. In which most people had died from either a skull fracture. There was a skull fracture in something like 80%, or there was like a bleed on the brain caused by the fall.
Internally, right? Internal, right?
Yeah, and there was also.
And what percent was that? So you had 80% neck fracture, X% bleed on the brain. What percentage do you remember?
It was 80% a fracture of the skull. And it was something like, I forget what the percentages were, but in just about every case, there was either same thing as in Durham, a fracture of the skull or a brain injury. And there was something like 60% had thoracic injuries as well from a fall down the stairs.
But how many had this? I mean, my interest would be, I would expect, now again, I'm not a medical examiner and I'm not a forensic expert, but I would expect that most falls down the stairs, to the extent that they result in serious injury or death, are from internal injuries, broken bones, things of this nature, not because you cut your head open and you bleed out, which is essentially what happened to Catherine Petersen.
Yeah. And
Um,
that's weird in itself. It's strange that you would be in that position to bleed out like that and not be able to be, that's a lot of blood to lose. And that's a lot of time to go by where she wasn't found and given
yeah,
the
because I
care
mean,
she
if her
needed.
skull is not fractured, I assume if she had been found in a timely fashion, what the medical examiner is saying is that they could have staunched the bleeding and she would have lived.
Yeah, yeah. It's again, it's very indicative of a guilty Michael Petersen.
Unless there was internal hemorrhaging, but anyway, we'll go on.
Yeah, I think that might have been the case. I need to. I'm not as prepared because I didn't note that. Partially because I didn't understand the autopsy report for Elizabeth Ratliff was a little bit. You could see there was a difference in the urgency and how they wrote the autopsy, or the autopsy. Even this picture is quite different, and the detail that went into this one. And I think with the Elizabeth Ratliff one, the authorities, the German authorities, were pretty much like, yeah, it wasn't murder. We're just going to highlight that she had some sort of a condition that caused her to be dizzy, and she was seeing somebody about it. She had headaches, so they had sort of put one and one together and said, yeah, this isn't a homicide, clearly.
Including with Kathleen, the autopsy report concluded that the 48-year-old woman sustained a matrix of severe injuries, including a fracture of the superior cornu of the left thyroid cartilage and 7 lacerations to the top and back of the head. Those are the lacerations, but the fracture of the superior cornu of left thyroid cartilage. All right.
Isn't the thyroid neck? Is that sort of neck area, or is it armpit
It's
area?
in your neck. Yeah, it's in your neck.
I mean, that would be something that would, in that study I saw from India, neck injury was fairly common in people that had fallen down the stairs. So that's not totally surprising. This is a great angle here, Dixon.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. This is preview for your OnlyFans, really. It's
sorry, I'm looking at the screen over top of my screen trying to see. I forget that I'm on TV here. Well, listen, everybody.
At least he's wearing trousers, everybody.
Exactly.
So let's go on to the next one, moving forward here. This one is less compelling to me, but one that I think is notable. So the couple had financial issues. So the couple were 143 grand in credit card debt at the time, which I don't know, for somebody who is living in a mansion is a lot. Again, for me, it's too much. But
I pay my credit card bill down every month to zero because I'm not paying. To me, $143,000 in credit card debt is a lot because you're paying 15% interest. But that's on our financial advice channel, which you can see and subscribe to it.
Okay. We do have a recent host of the show, Hugh, has his financial channel up and running. He's got almost 300,000 Instagram subscribers now. So if anybody wants really incredible, yep, he's full-time. The Old Bearded Philosophy channel. If anybody wants to see Hugh, he's got 5,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel, and he's close to 300,000 Instagram followers. So anybody who wants incredible financial advice, Hugo, if you're watching,
I think his first piece of financial advice to you is you should have stuck with me, Sean, instead of that bum Dixon. Because you'd have 3,000 subscribers right now instead of yeah. All right.
No. He's doing. I don't do finance. I don't do finance at all. Clearly, because I thought 140. I thought because 143,000 grand in debt for a rich person may not be a lot to them.
To me, it's a lot. Cards, holy macaroni.
Well, if you've got like I don't know however many $1 million estate this is, there was a lot of money in specifically with Kathleen. I don't know how much Michael Petersen had. He was a somewhat successful author, and he didn't have a job, but there would be income coming in from book sales, albeit probably not a ton. But the reason this is interesting is there was credit card debt, and there was an expectation that Kathleen may be made redundant or laid off towards the end of the year. And there was a 1.4 million life insurance policy for Kathleen, and the estate was was in Kathleen's name. It wasn't going. I don't believe it would have gone I don't know. I don't know what the situation was, but she owned the property. She was the one with the money, and the life insurance was out in her name, 1.4 million. So that could be a motivation for murder. It's a ropey one, but it's one that I think raises eyebrows.
Yeah. I mean, that is a lot of reasons to. I mean, listen, just because someone's wealthy or is worth a lot of their. I mean, if that's the case, Sean, I better watch my P's and Q's because let me tell you, I've taken out quite a bit of life insurance on myself, and yeah.
I
There
don't.
are several people who stand to gain tremendously if they cut the brakes to my cars, particularly before my morning commute to work.
That was your mistake. Life
It
insurance.
was.
If you've taken out life insurance and it wasn't your idea, you need to be careful. Now that's the question. Whose idea was the life insurance?
Yes, I'm sure. Well, I mean, listen, it should be
Wait,
your
wait.
idea.
No. Don't. Is it your idea or not? I need to know now. You
Oh,
sort of.
mine. Oh, yeah. I mean,
Okay, so
like
you're
my
fine.
wife, my ex-wife and I agreed to take life insurance out on each other, which we still have, even though we are divorced. We're actually, ironically, less likely to murder one another now, I think. But that's obviously for the protection of our son.
Yeah, of course.
And then, of course, I have a work policy that I just get for free for the, that there's a certain amount they give you for nothing. I actually lost. I just changed jobs, and it used to be $200,000. Now it's only 120. So, however, I took out an additional policy because it was so cheap through my employer that doubles. A double indemnity in the James M. Cain novel, famously, in the event that my death is ruled an accident, like say a fall down the stairs. So, and that one, I have a different beneficiary on that. But,
it's interesting. Your life isn't worth the credit card debt of Kathleen and Michael Petersen.
Yes, it is because
143. You said 120.
That was I have a $500,000 policy that I have on myself for the so he will get $620,000 before we talk about my retirement accounts, to which he also stands to inherit. And then I have another 250 or 500 pays 500 if this is all like, I hope the audience is taking this all down, and whichever one of them can figure out how to crack my my password.
I think this is
change the beneficiary to themselves, and
I'm actually more worried about your well-being because it sounds like you're making an evidentiary case to support the conviction of your murderer by doing this on the channel.
The false conviction of my not murderer. That's why.
So we have financial issues, but there was another one, and this I wanted to talk to you about this next one, and I'm going back to Kathleen Petersen's autopsy. And one of the things, and I want to stress, I'm going to play doctor, and I don't know anything about medicine or forensics, but when I started to look at the actual autopsy, it became apparent that the injuries were on a specific side of the body. And I was trying to sort of postulate what happened. And if, let's say, there was something that Kathleen was being hit over the head with, the injuries would be kind of indicative of somebody doing this, covering their head, because the injuries are going all up and down their arms, their hands, their fingers, and on the back of their head. There's some injuries on the face. But if you look, there was a lot of injury down the back here, more so than the front. The front was largely unscathed, with the exception of a few bruises around the eye. And I just look at this, and I can see where they see defensive wounds. And if it was an implement that wasn't heavy enough to damage the skull, but heavy enough to break the skin, you could have injury without breaking bones on the arms, especially if you're getting hit from behind and you're trying to protect yourself. And she did have hair in her hands. So when I look at this autopsy picture here, this rendering of where these injuries are and what they are, to me, I can see that. I can see there's defensive wounds there that are specific to that.
This is exactly why I think he did it. And you just mentioned to me, which we haven't talked about yet, the most damning, the hair in the hands. There's no, you fell down the stairs. If it were her own hair, they would have been able to tell that it wasn't.
Yeah.
So there's no valid explanation for that.
It's difficult to. I mean, I would say all of this, it's difficult. Actually, I'm going to save that because there's a point that I want to bring up here towards the end. Next, and I spoke to you about this, and this was something that bothered me from the first time I watched the show, and that was his behavior when she had died. and they had interviewed the girls who the two stepdaughters that he had taken care of from Elizabeth Ratliff. And when they came to the house the night that their stepmother had died, Michael Petersen was there with the son wrapped in a blanket. It's not incoherent. He was saying, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." And they had noted how that was weird. That they're in this weird situation. He's saying these weird things, and that really bothered me.
Yeah.
That he was saying, "I didn't do it." And if my spouse, and I know you've heard me say this before, but just for the audience, if my spouse had fallen down the stairs, the last thing I'd be thinking about is my guilt. And if I did think about my guilt, and I would say that I don't care that much about my spouse, that sort of counters a lot of his argument that he loved his wife. So it's either you love your wife and you're worried about her, being gone, or you're not that bothered about your wife and you're worried about your well-being. Well, I just find it very inconsistent with somebody who didn't have some hand to play in her death. It bothers me a lot that they said that.
Yeah, no, it does bother me too. I don't like I don't think that this rises to the level of evidence as such. You know what I mean? Because people do sometimes do strange or unaccountable things in moments of shock.
He was delirious. There was police hanging all over him. He was worried about his kids, whatever.
But you'd still, I always want to be careful about that, but it still raises eyebrows. I agree. I mean, the ultimate example of why you have to be careful about that is two things, right? If you watch the Zapruder, with respect to the JFK assassination is what I'm thinking of. You watch the Zapruder film. I mean, you watch Jackie Kennedy climb up on the back of the car to try to retrieve the piece of her husband's skull that got blown off. Like, what's she going to do with it? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, if you think about it as sort of a rational response, like, I mean, I guess there's part of you that says, well, I'll put it back, and like in a moment of shock, that probably sounds like sensible, even though after the fact, you're like, huh? But more than that even was when they asked her about it afterwards, she's like, I didn't do that. And she insisted the day she died that she never did it, even though it's on film. I mean, she absolutely did.
That's a fucked up situation, though, and I
well, right, but I mean, like, it's a fucked up situation. Like, if you,
it's the same thing,
you beat your wife to death. That's that's
or you discover her having fallen down the stairs,
and that's the thing. Like, if if you do go in and like you're thinking, all right, I'm headed up to bed. It's getting late, and I'm going to just climb the stairs. And whoa, you know what I mean? Like, that's that's especially because I assume they weren't just sitting out in the back porch, just smoking pipe. I'm sure he was probably having a glass of wine or two, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and assume that, I mean, she had some blood in her system, alcohol in her system.
It wasn't a lot. It wasn't like,
I mean, a lot, but I mean, just enough to like be a little bit, not on top, like you're tired, you've had a few drinks, and now, you've discovered someone bloody at the bottom of your wife bloody at the bottom.
She was below the legal limit, I believe, but she had enough. But there was just to move on, some bonus points attached to this. So we're here for the bonus round. A few other things. He did, and I didn't quite understand what the files were, but he had the before and the night of and after deleted a shit ton of computer and phone files. And that's a very weird behavior to take up before and after your wife passes away. If it was just after, I would say, okay, he has some weird skeletons in his closet and he's worried, given how the police behaved that night, that they're going to look okay. But because it was before, that's problematic for his case of innocence. He was also home alone. There was no evidence of a break-in, which again, that's it makes it hard to make a case that somebody would have broken in and done something, and
unless,
you then have to.
They were an owl.
You know what? This owl thing is making more sense by the minute. Why is this not being talked about more?
Yeah, they're sneaky little bastards. They can get in the smallest spaces. Yep.
I'm scared of owls now. This is I don't know if I'm going to go outside tonight. Tough time. So Michael Petersen, I think what we'll do is we'll transition. We'll give our verdict to what we think, and I think what I'll do is I'll air that on a separate. We're going to record this now, so again, for continuity, we wear the same clothes every time we record. Or this is your Saturday apparel.
Right. Every Saturday, this is the clothing I wear.
So let's talk about the outcome, whether he was guilty or innocent, and what you think. Do you want to go first on the outcome of
Sure.
the case for him?
I'll go first. I will say I'm not surprised he was convicted at trial. You know what I mean? When you put it all together, I think that from a jury's point of view, the photograph of the blood all over the bottom of the stairs, and the fact of him behaving in these suspicious ways, it just makes the idea that, oh, she just fell, just seem a little too far-fetched, when you put it all together. Do I think in a technical sense the prosecution did its job and went beyond a reasonable doubt? I mean, the jury said it did. So, I mean, one way of answering that is like, yes, they did, because the jury said they did. If I were on the jury, I tend to be skeptical of prosecution narratives, only because, I think that's your job really as a juror, is to really put things to the test. But, this many years after the fact, and with this many documentaries and everything done about it, I'm still more convinced than not, probably past a reasonable doubt, that Michael Petersen did affect the death of his wife, Kathleen.
It's interesting. We go back to that reasonable doubt conversation, because I agree that there's not a lot of other explanations outside of his physical intervention in the death of his wife. I don't know that the prosecution proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt, but I don't think it's different to your description. I think my perception of what beyond a reasonable doubt is may be different. So if you were to
I
put
tend
me
to be
on,
fairly conservative on reasonable doubt, but there's just something about, and the thing is, it's like sort of unfair. I'm looking at
what do
it
you mean
after
by
the fact,
conservative? Really quick, would conservative meaning you
meaning
maybe
like you really have to prove it to me. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like I mean, like don't think that, well, that he did it because I don't want to let a killer go free. No, 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 no. You know what I mean? I need to see significant evidence. But I think sometimes, and I always hark back to this case, and so I'm apologizing for doing it again, but like that guy Adnan Syed, who was covered by Serial, that's another case where there wasn't a lot of direct physical evidence like this one, where you could say, aha, we have his DNA, or we have a videotape, or we have a witness. Nothing of this nature. You're going based on circumstantial evidence. The problem is the lack of plausible alternative explanation. And what it boils down to is it plausible that she fell down the stairs? I mean, he hung his whole defense on that. And because of the blood drawing, because of the his own behavior, because of the simple circumstances of the way she was injured, and the extent of her injuries, the fact that she had hair in her hand, the fact that she had what appeared to be defensive wounds. I mean, that's just, to me, and I know that the burden of proof is not on him per se, but if you see, when you're putting in a defense that's quasi affirmative, you're saying, she died, but she died from a fall down the stairs. Well, the prosecution has presented all this evidence that it was a beating. I mean, I understand that theoretically you should only have to be able to make it reasonably doubtful that it was a beating. But I feel like I needed more evidence showing me that how a fall down the stairs could really have produced a set of circumstances that we see. And I just don't see it.
So for me, it was one simple thing, one simple point that gave me cause to say, yeah, I can't convict. And that is the fact that the medical examiner couldn't rule out a fall down the stairs. Mm-hmm. And that to me is that's definably reasonable doubt. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there that points to Michael Petersen, but there's no evidence to really say that he definitively did anything. There's a lot of indicators. Yeah. But if the medical examiner, who is on the side, not officially, but who is representing the prosecution's case, that this was an attack, when you get asked the question, can you rule out a fall down the stairs? If that answer is no, then yeah, that's
well, how did
the
medical examiner deal with the hair in her hand?
Now, this is the problem with the fact that we didn't get the full case on stream. which is another thing we can cover at some point. Should all court cases be
I mean,
televised?
I guess you could argue that she, that the hair was in her hand previously from some other event, and then it just stayed in her hand when she fell down the stairs. Because I agree with you. When you state it that way, Sean, I have to say I'm almost like, you're right. Like if the medical examiner says I can't rule out a fall down the stairs, then you can't prove there was a homicide. If you can't prove there was a homicide,
it makes it difficult.
Yeah, I mean, then that's
the hair's an interesting
itself reasonable doubt, but yeah.
I mean, the hair, it's difficult without the hair is it bothers me, but I guess you could say, is it possible that like she was out of her, mind a bit? I'm not trying to be deliberate with my language, but she's concussed severely, bleeding out, and it's just, I don't know, just her body's doing things. She sees, I mean, there's so many things that you could say that she was touching her hair and then had a fit or a seizure. I don't know, but at the end of the day, it's even now when they did the follow-up trial, the appeal, I think in both instances, the new medical examiner for the SBI, who was discounting Dwayne Deaver, which is, if anybody hasn't seen the newer episodes, it's on after the original one when he gets convicted, couldn't rule out a fall down the stairs, which is a big reason outside of Dwayne Deaver's behaviors as an expert, really makes it difficult to convict him. But I do think, though, it's difficult for me to see any other way than him not being involved, because the one other thing we didn't mention about his guilt, actually, not to finish on sort of a bonus point one, jumping back to the original, even like he was wearing shorts and a t-shirt and it was 50 degrees, or I don't know, it's like 8 degrees
I remember
Celsius,
that.
and flip-flops, and there's a lot of inconsistencies, but sorry, I digress. So yeah, I think we've well and truly covered that one efficiently, and I really enjoyed this method of covering these popular cases.
I appreciate all the work that our new producer did in creating this slideshow.
Goddamn right.
Yeah. I mean, I hope Carl's taking notes, because if he ever wants to get another job, he needs to.
He's gonna have to work his way back in.
Right, and this producer needs to remind me not to refer to jokes that the audience won't get. But
no, I think they need to keep coming. They need to keep coming. So anyway, thanks to everybody who's watched. Please do like and subscribe. We always want to get people to comment, and we do try to reply to comments. We have a few cases in the past that have actually gotten a lot of traction, a lot of comments, which I think we should reply to. I get Darlie Roudier comments, or we get Darlie Roudier comments on a weekly basis.
Do we really?
That's that case. So if anybody's watching to this point, our Darlie Roudier is sort of our gold standard of what we probably should be doing, and that one collectively has 30,000 views.
We did it. Sort of.
It's we sort of did. We did it on one series. But what I'll do is I'll put the playlists here towards the end, so you can click on those and watch them. And if you do have any ideas, we do get ideas from people who want us to cover specific stories. We like to cover things where there is question marks or very popular cases where we can dig into them like this. But anyway, thanks again for enjoying Dixon. It's been a pleasure as always. And thank you, everybody. And we hope to see you soon.
As always.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.